just makes me want to be with you. I haven't hugged my friend Robert Jones like that in 7 months. Let's start off by saying that this sucks, right? I mean, I know we have to pretend it's all great, and it is great in some ways, but the truth is, it sucks. And we need to just say that out loud every once in a while. This is a great alternative, right? And I'm glad we're here. And I got to be honest with you, after seeing the end of that video, I think we should all send a petition in to make sure that Annie Capps is the moderator of the next presidential debate. Because yeah, I think she may just wrangle those folks into the room. It would be good. That would be good. It is absolutely my honor to be interviewing these four stalwarts of folk music and of culture in our country. As Annie mentioned, they are all friends of mine, and I cherish those friendships, and I cherish the idea that I get to ask them some questions on how to I don't know, talk about how what they've learned from their lives, creating beautiful art and sending it out into the world. So the truth is, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time giving long biographies in the introductions. I encourage you to go check out their biographies. I'll talk a little bit about that, but I really want to spend most of the time listening to what they have to say. And so that's the way I think I'll do it. I'll give brief introductions, and then we'll just give each person about 15 minutes of time. In that time, I've encouraged the other elders. I hate using that word, elders, to because it's going to be 3:30 by the time this is over, and they're probably going to have to get the early bird special over at Denny's, right? If they're true elders, I will try to encourage them to also pipe in. You know, if Claudia wants to ask something of Anne, or Reggie wants to ask something of Rich, please do that, and we'll try to get all of our questions in if possible. But mostly I'll just kind of open it up with an idea and see where it goes. And I think we're going to start with the lovely and the talented and the amazing Claudia Schmidt. Claudia, can you unmute
Hi.
yourself?
I think I'm unmuted.
Very
Yeah.
good. I mean, Claudia, you belong here. I think you might be the only one that actually has Midwestern in the title of one of their albums, right?
That's right.
That beautiful record, Midwestern Heart, that you put
Big
out.
ornery thing. Yeah.
What year was that you put out Midwest?
1981. It was
1981.
my second
Wow.
album.
I just played from it on the radio last week. That
Thank you.
beautiful version of Michael Smith's Vampire is such a
Yeah.
great song. So let's. One of the things I think there is an absolute string that kind of connects all four of these individuals, and that is that they've all, like we have to do in this world of folk music, we have to come up with real diverse ways to make a living. It's really hard to just be a coffee house performer because, quite frankly, there's not enough coffee houses out there for all performers. And one of the things that all four of our performers have figured out are all kinds of ways to use their talents in their community. Claudia, for instance, is not only just a folk singer, a dulcimer player, a 12-string guitar player, but she's also an amazing jazz singer. And she's, as most of you know, a huge presence when it comes to vocal technique. And she's come up with all these different ways, other than just what we would think of as folk music. So I thought, Claudia, maybe you could talk a little bit about why you weren't just the regular old coffee house performer, but what made you kind of delve into these other areas.
Well, around that time, 1981, I was starting to play larger concerts, and I was sort of getting. It was the closest I ever came in my life to having people. I had people, and and they were sort of pushing me, and I actually had a crisis. I had a pretty serious crisis, and I sort of threw it all away and moved to Beaver Island up in the middle of Lake Michigan. And I became an innkeeper. I opened a bed and breakfast and then a restaurant a few years down the road. I started feeling like I never felt like I wanted to be a lifer at anything, including being a musician. And it was almost like a test to see, because I kept hearing about these people that I play 360 days a year and I never miss a gig, and it felt like an addiction to me. And I started thinking, am I addicted to this? What will happen if I stop doing this? Is my ego so invested in this that I'll just crumble into dust if I do something else? And so it really was kind of a challenge that I threw into my path at that point. And I ended up loving being an innkeeper. The restaurant, not so much. It had its moments, but I loved taking care of people. And and then I started realizing in the course of doing that that it's really how I've always approached music. And that it was just doing it on a smaller scale, on kind of a, a micro scale. And then I found that I was missing music. And by the time I went back, tried to get back more into music, everything had changed, and there was a new generation of promoters, and so I kind of had to go to the back of the line and start over again. I lost all that momentum that I'd built up in the early '80s, late '70s, early '80s. It didn't wait around, you know. So in a way, I had to kind of start over again with the coffee houses. But the thing is, this last time around, um, it was like a final. The way I describe it is I tried to get my day job back and I failed, and and I realized that this is really my soul work. It's really my destiny, and so I'm not addicted to it, but I don't really want to live without it either.
Do you think that break was what allowed you to come to that conclusion?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because I was getting so depressed. It was like the more successful I was, the more depressed I was, and the more I felt like my life wasn't my own, and I'd be on the road, and I found myself more and more. I was just I found myself going into bathrooms a lot because I knew I could be alone there. I felt like my life was being somehow taken away from me, you know, um, and. And so it was like I hadn't really made the music thing started for me so organically. I mean, I didn't go searching for it. It wasn't a big ambition, you
Tell
know.
us a little bit about that. How did it start for you?
Yeah, I moved to Chicago with a day job. I was secretary and office manager for Tempo 21 Lawn Fertilization and Weed Control Company. And I had an ex-minister friend of mine who knew I was a musician from my hometown, asked me. I was sort of at loose ends, and he actually drove me to my first audition at Amazing Grace Coffee House when it was still on campus at Northwestern. And I did an audition, and suddenly I was playing these clubs in Chicago, and suddenly it just sort of happened. Suddenly it fell into my lap, and within a few months, I didn't really quit my day job. I had a car accident driving home from my day job because I was being awake all night and playing at clubs and couldn't stay awake on the drive home. So I mean, I sat around for the next month just kind of going, I guess I'm a full-time musician now. I guess I'm a full-time musician now. And I didn't book gigs. I didn't, I was getting it into my cellular being, that's happened. So I didn't really say one day, I'm going to be a musician, I'm going to be a folk singer. It was just already happening. And so maybe, yeah, later on when I stepped away and did that other thing, which I loved, I realized that it was a calling, and
Well, could you talk a little bit about what specific skills you had as a performer and as a road warrior that worked as an innkeeper?
oh, so much, yeah. Uh, uh, First of all, I'd spent my whole life traveling, so I had a pretty good idea of how to make people feel comfortable coming in as guests, having been the recipient of much hospitality over the years. And so it was nice to be able to give that back in a way. Yeah, that was a big part of the joy of it for me, to know how to make things right. And the idea that the creativity, the font of creativity, it can be many, many things. And for me, I've always enjoyed making spaces. I've moved a lot through my life, and part of it for me has always been the enjoyment of going into a new space and making it my own, making it homey, and making it soulful. And so getting to do that with an eye toward having people come and feel comfortable there was great. Knowing how to talk to people, knowing how to draw people out, loving to hear people's stories. I mean, I heard so many great stories, and just like in folk music itself, my friend Sally Rogers and I were talking about that yesterday. The thing about this music, and that we miss so much about not doing concerts, is we have met so many people at concerts who have become friends, lifelong friends. That's part of the treasure of what we do. It's not like you go play for a bunch of strangers and go off. Not for us anyway. Not in the coffee house world and the house concert world. I mean, it's so personal, and there was something about getting even more personal, like going in and cleaning the bathroom after someone had stayed there, really getting down and dirty personal. And it just, everything got more grounded. I guess that's it. It grounded everything. It grounded everything I'd been doing up to that point, and brought it down to earth. And so I was able to come back to the music with that. Everything always plays into everything else. Like what you were saying earlier about my doing jazz singing. For me, it's just about singing and using my voice. And anything, I go and sing jazz, and I bring something back into the folk music, and I draw freely off of the folk music stuff I do when I'm singing jazz. They all feed each other, and so it's just become a richer and richer diet over the years of doing these different things, and then seeing how they build on each other. So I always encourage younger people just to, if you feel a call to do something else. I mean, now more than ever in our culture, it's not like anybody can hardly even be a lifer at something anymore. What was that? I heard a great quote. I love, specialization is for the insects.
Well, speaking of that, you giving a quote off the top of your head like that, that's a beautiful answer, because I've seen Claudia perform dozens and dozens of times, and some of the most magical moments I've spent in an audience is to kind of watch Claudia weave together amazing elements. She doesn't just sing a song, get applause, sing a song. She tells poems, she does quotes, she does storytelling, she does instrumentals. It's really it's a crafted performance,
A
and
what
you always
performance?
you
Oh,
crafted,
crafted.
not
Okay.
crappy, crafted, very different. Um, and I think that's one of the interesting things, is that you take care of the people that came to your inn in the same way that you took care of every audience you seemed to play for. It's like you knew who they were, and you crafted something for them. And I think that has been the magic of so many of your performances that I've personally seen. And what about this idea of weaving all these different elements into performance? Can you talk a little bit about philosophy of performance? It's one thing to have songs. It's a whole nother thing to know how to put them together in a way that moves people in an audience.
Yeah. Well, another inadvertent thing that happened to me early in life is I ran away with a theater group right after high school. And I toured with this group for about a year. And it was a very grassroots. We would perform in churches and schools and coffee houses and prisons, and wherever people had us, and we'd stay in people's homes, and kind of getting me ready for down the road. And I mean, we'd go into restaurants and have $1 limit on meals. We travel in vans to different parts of the country. And I didn't do any music that year. I'd already been doing some, playing in high school, starting to play guitar and write songs. But what I was learning during that time is how to be on stage. I was learning about theater. I was learning about using your whole body when you're performing, about how to inhabit a stage, and a character. And so when I gave that up after a year, and came back and started doing performing, it gave me a leg up in club performing, because I already had a sense of that I wasn't conscious of that at the time. Now it's one of those things I look back on and go, that was a good thing to do. So I always encourage people who are getting into performing to take some theater classes, to do some improv classes. Because it just puts you in your body. It pulls it all, helps pull it all together. And then also the idea that why am I up here? What is it's what do I want to do? And so I've always been fascinated by the way, in putting together sets over the years, even though you might do some of the same songs from night to night, um, you discover that the way you place them in a set really changes the impact of the song. Like I've done a song for years that never got a laugh line, and one night suddenly, because of the song that it came after, there was this whole little portal opened up of meaning in the song that hadn't been there before. So it's like getting to experience your songs, in all these different ways. So I think that's kind of where I got started, with the idea of linking songs together, of finding places where they might just tangentially bump up against each other for a minute and try it out. See, what would this be like if I did this song here? And then the poetry part was after hearing storytellers at the Coffee House Extempore, the 12 Moon Storytellers, Gail Ross and Elise Ellis opened for me, and I watched them tell their stories, and I watched the audience be just completely give themselves to this experience. I read my first spoken word piece. I'd just written it in my Skin Gangsters poem not too long before that. That kind of launched it for me. I never turned back. And I started realizing how the spoken word can illuminate something in a song, and then also the song can sometimes, if people think they're just hearing a poem, they think, oh, I'm hearing a poem. But if they're in the middle of being in a song and they're all kind of already like, la, and then you lay this poem on them, they're just like, oh, la, and then you go to another song and it's like, la,
You're getting too technical. What's that?
So there's a continuity to it, It's like a magic carpet ride, if it's all happening in the right way.
But I guess
it's exciting for me is just for the audience, because I don't know how this is going to turn out.
Well, and I think that has to do with the magic of your performances, because let's face it, if you're excited by it, then chances are your audience will be excited by it as well.
Yeah.
And
or
that's
scared, I don't know.
And all of that stuff is really accessible. I'm speaking to young performers or people who are just starting to get them, that opened up a whole world for you. And it opened up, you just added all kinds of color to the palette that you could use when creating these performances as well. What about songwriting? Because and we just have a couple more minutes, but we haven't talked about your amazing songs. What is it about, 3 verses, a chorus, and a bridge that you think is a good way to express and tell the stories that you want to tell?
Yeah, I like the challenge of I think that's what's drawn me to poetry. It's a distillation process, I thought of people say you should write a novel or you should write, and I start to try to, and it's like I'm not patient enough to do that. And there's something about looking at a situation and going for essences that that are a fascinating process for me. I love the craft of writing for that, of how you be as streamlined as possible, and say the most possible at the same time, And I started writing songs as soon as I got my first guitar at 16. I just started writing songs. I didn't think about it. Pretty, they're not great songs, but they
Are
were
you
songs.
are you a write when the muse strikes kind of writer, or do you sit down and sort of coax the muse out every once in a while? How do you normally?
Both, but I think my strongest stuff is just being receptive, being in a receptive mode, and I feel like the best songs are like receivements, they really just come in. And so my job at that point is to be paying attention. And that's hard work. That is really hard work in this culture.
To pay attention.
So with all the distractions. So that's like a big part of how I approach writing.
Well, Claudia, we have one more minute together, and then I will have to mute you. So,
oh, do I get to do a song?
Annie, we're doing songs during the interview or after?
I thought
To
kind of
end?
wrap up with a song?
Perfect. No, that's great. We didn't talk about that. So I'll tell you what, why don't you give us 30 seconds of your last bit of wisdom? Why should we vote for you, Claudia? And then give us a song.
Why should you vote for me? Well, I won't let you down.
You never, ever do. Before you do your song, let me just speak on behalf of the 80 or so people in the room and all the people on Facebook that this world is a better place because you are in it. Your art
Oh,
is in it.
thank
We really do
you.
appreciate all you've done.
Thanks so much. About paying attention, what led to the writing of the song was driving. And when I used to drive long distances and have the radio on, public radio, and little snippets come out. And so this song was kind of created from two snippets. One was the tail end of a discussion or a talk I heard Deval Patrick giving to some people in Minneapolis. And I don't know what led up to the talk, but one of his final statements was, "When did we become a country that shouts our anger and whispers our kindness?" And that really just, it just went deep, deep, deep into me. And then another time, I wasn't so much listening as kind of half listening. And out of this conversation came the two words, everyday gestures. And those two words just, I loved them. I spent the next like 60 miles just going, oh, everyday gestures, everyday gestures. It just felt good in my mouth. And I thought about how in our country, we're these things are happening all the time. You know, we have the capacity to be way heinous, and then we have the capacity to do these amazing acts of generosity and kindness. And those aren't the things that kind of get in the news. So anyway, that's what led to this song called Everyday Gestures. Oh, yeah. Shattered by greed, the undeserving are left in need. Children for sale, whole countries bleed. The land is abused with poison seed. Yet human kindness flows unchecked. It makes space for children to feel respect. Sends brave souls into the heart of neglect, where they rebuild places and lives once wrecked. Ooh, the doctor in the village, the children outside. It's the everyday gestures that turn the tide. The everyday gestures that turn the tide. It's the everyday gestures that turn the tide. Y'all can sing that with me. It's the everyday gestures that turn the tide. Hard to make, too little work, thieves on the take. Your children hungry, so much at stake is enough to make anyone's spirit break. Yet love survives in the bleakest place. It shines right out from your lover's face, from the friends who hold you in sacred space, from each generous act of healing grace. Just a tender touch in a wakeful night. It's the everyday gestures that make it alright. The everyday gestures that make it alright. It's the everyday gestures that make it alright. The everyday gestures that make it alright. Shudders with pain from endless wars for private gain. Yet peace descends like timely rain, where love compels us to try once again. Sometimes it's just a dance in the street, or a meal on the doorstep when you come home beat. It's wherever we conquer the mean with the sweet, where compassion enters so the troubles retreat. Fierce loving kindness, the hand unfurled. It's the everyday gestures that change the world. The everyday gestures that change the world. It's the everyday gestures that change the world. The everyday gestures that change the world. Oh.
Oh, Claudia, this community loves and appreciates you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Claudia Schmidt, everybody. Let's turn our attention now to Mr. Rich Warren.
Hi, Matt.
Hey, Rich, did you want to say a few words before I introduced you?
Well, first, it's so appropriate that I should be following Claudia for two reasons. I believe I was probably one of the first people ever to record her, and certainly the first to play her on the radio back in 1974. When I was hired at WFMT, Ray Norstrand handed me a broom and said, clean up the mess and also go out and record some folk singers. And I said, well, who should I record? Because I had just come back to town from college. He said, I've heard good things about this woman named Claudia Schmidt. So I invited her to the studio and she just amazed me. And the second thing is, how many years later was it? 22 years later, I went and stayed at the Bluebird Bed and Breakfast on Beaver Island, and she was a marvelous host. And because of Claudia, I ended up buying land on Beaver Island and building a house on Beaver Island, all because of Claudia Schmidt. So it's appropriate that we should be following each other in this conversation. And the other one thing I wanted to say was, when Annie Cap so graciously offered me the opportunity to participate in this conversation today, she said, well, you can do it via internet this year, or you can do it live next year if we have a live conference. And I said, well, who would I be sharing with this year? And she said, well, Claudia Schmidt, Ann Hills, and Reggie Harris. I said, well, that's a no-brainer. I'd rather do it via the internet with those people than anybody else in the universe next year. So it's just such an honor to be sharing this. And of course, with you, Matt, as the moderator, MC, host, whatever, I think Annie was quite right that there's nobody quite like you in holding these things together and making people feel welcome. So now it's your turn.
Well, I appreciate that, Rich. Thanks so much. And, it seems to me that in this world we've created, in this community we've created, there are people who make the music and there are people who make the music happen. And I was joking this morning with my friend Don White, who a lot of you know from Boston. And I told him, I said, because we started talking about Rich Warren, and Don adores Rich Warren, as so many people do. And I said, I said that thing, and I said, and it's equal. We can't have the music if we don't have people making the music happen. And Don, in his Boston way, said, it's not equal at all. We could use a lot more people who make the music happen. So, and there's some truth to that. And when I start looking back at your career, and of course, most of us know you as the host of WFMT for decades and decades, taking over a legacy of radio that got started by Mike Nichols, but these amazing folks back 50 some years ago. And then just not just taking that over, but it seemed like that was a destiny for you. It's like knowing you and how passionate you were about this music from 1974 on, maybe before that, when you were recording people, in your bedroom, right? This was before you went to do Claudia's shows. You were doing this on your own with no particular audience in mind. You've had an amazing passion for this music from the very beginning, and you turned it into someone who makes this music happen for lots of people. For those of you, when we talk about people on radio and people who are engineering records and recording concerts, they're not the people you know the name of right away, unless you look at the liner notes. And I started to look at the liner notes of some of the very best live recordings I've ever heard, and damned if Rich Warren's name isn't on just about every one of them. Bob Frankie's early recordings, the Steve Goodman tribute, John Roberts and Tony Barron, the list goes on. So yeah, Rich is an amazing radio host, now retired, but he also had his stamp on folk music as it was coming into all of our consciousness. Will you talk a little bit about that early passion?
Well, I've always been in love with music, and my parents, unfortunately, were always technologically handicapped. So until I was 12 years old or 11 years old, we only had a 78 RPM record player, which was kind of unusual. And when I was the age of 6, I took our upright typewriter and made a list of all the 78 RPM records we had in the house, and then told my parents they could listen to any record they wanted for a nickel. They could just check off on the list. And several years later, long before I discovered WFMT, I was listening to one of the AM stations in Chicago, and there was an announcer named John Doremus who had a program called Patterns in Music, where he'd play things that fit together, that made a continuous sequence of music. And I thought, that is really cool because each song could build on the next song. And at the same time on AM radio, there was a guy named Mal Belair's on WBBM, and he was playing folk music. And I heard Judy Collins, I heard Pete Seeger, and I'm thinking, this is really phenomenal because of all the 78s we had in the house, my favorite album was an album of sea shanties. I mean, the classical music was great, the jazz was great, but I loved this album of sea shanties. And then I got turned on to WFMT and the Midnight Special. And it was just head over heels. I just fell in love with both Ray and Norm and with the music they presented, but not merely the music. It's the way they presented it, that every song fit with every other song. And there'd be comedy, like Claudia talked about, reading poetry and spoken word. And on the Midnight Special, everything was in perfect order. And it occurred to me, Utah Phillips used to say that Samuel Coleridge said that good prose was words in the best possible order, but that poetry was the best possible words in the best possible order. And that's the way I looked at music and presenting music, is that not only do you want to find the best songs, but you want to share them in the best way so that each song relates to and enforces and enhances the songs around it. And that's always been my goal. And it's been an utter joy. And that's why it took 8 hours to prepare a 3-hour Midnight Special. It's because I had to find just the right song, just the right comedy piece. And that's what the people I'm sharing this with, Reggie and Claudia and Ann, do that on stage. They find things that fit together. And if it's not their original song, they find a song that fits in a sequence with poetry, with spoken word, with narrative. And that makes them very special artists because it communicates so much more to the listener than just getting up on stage and singing songs. And that's how, this has moved me all these years.
And can you remember, you mentioned recording Claudia. Can you talk about some of the other kind of landmark concerts that you've had a chance to record or engineer in the early days?
Almost overwhelmed. I think, of course, Tom Paxton. I don't think I've recorded over a dozen Tom Paxton concerts, and I never can recall a bad Tom Paxton concert. Liam Clancy and Tommy Makem perhaps did one of the all-time great concerts I've ever recorded at Stages Music Hall in 1979. Again, using poetry, using prose, speaking, and they just wove together this magical evening. But there are so many, that Bob Franke recording you referred to, that one night in Chicago back in, what was it, 83? I forget
Something
the
like
year.
that, yeah.
Just was a magical night. There are these special things. Emily Friedman used to put on these Come For To Sing benefits at First Somebody Else's Troubles and then Holstein's in Chicago and invite wonderful artists to perform. And I remember one evening, I think it was 1982, she had Robin and Linda Williams. And they did, to me, one of the greatest sets they've ever done. Just a remarkable set. It was right after they had written Don't Let Me Come Home a Stranger. So there are so many great performances, Claudia's performances, Ann's performances, Reggie's performances. I remember at our New Year's Eve concert a few years ago, Reggie was on, and it was toward the end, and somebody had done a very moving, heartfelt, very sad song. It involved death. And this was New Year's Eve, and it was a great song, but I was really hoping that somehow the spirit would be lifted. And Reggie jumped in with both feet and brought the audience up 3 feet above their chairs, and they were hovering in the air for all 4 minutes of Reggie's song. He just magically changed the moment. And this is the mark of a great artist. So I've had so many special moments that I can't even remember them all because each one in its own way was remarkable and memorable.
Well, Rich, one of the things, your particular set of skills kind of sets you apart from the other 3 performers is that you're not technically a stage performer yourself, although you've spent a lot of time emceeing concerts and making people feel welcome on the radio. It's just a different kind of performer, but you have been exposed to more performances and more recordings than probably all 4 of us combined. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about, like, I mean, you may be the only non-performer who offers a performance workshop because you have seen enough performances to know. So let's talk first about performing and then about maybe recorded music, because I think there's a lot of artists in the room that would like to know what a radio host listens to and listens for. But let's begin with performances. What kind of advice do you give people when they're either starting out or when they ask you for advice?
Well, it started out back in '74. A good friend of mine, who was a brilliant singer-songwriter, had come to Chicago, and I recorded him at the Earl of Old Town. And then I invited him to WFMT while I edited the recording of his live performance. In those days, we used razor blades on splicing blocks. And I said, I'm cutting this out. Here's why. I'm changing this. I'm butting this together. I'm tightening up your, every time I made a cut, I explained to him what I was doing. And then I played him the finished tape, and he looked at me like he had seen the glory. He said, this is fabulous. And the next time he went on stage, he performed the edited set. I mean, he was a quick learn. And I started thinking, so many performers just don't get positive feedback. And I only give positive feedback. I mean, I don't want to hurt somebody. I don't want them to feel that they haven't done a good job. And over the years, I've just encountered so many things that people could fix. And so I hold these performers workshops, and I've conferred with Tom Paxton and Jim Fleming and various other people about what makes a good performance from people who really know it, and incorporated all that, because a lot of people have a lot of talent, but they don't know how to get it across to the audience. And my goal in life is to simply help them reach the audience, whether the audience is live in the room or on the radio. My goal is to get the music out there in the best possible way. And I like to think that I've helped people in doing that, because there's so many simple little things that people forget, and they need to learn.
Do any of those occur to you off the top of your head? Some of the top two or three, maybe, hate to say mistakes, but maybe the kind of pitfalls that performers fall into, in your opinion?
Oh, the list has 20 points on it that I hand out. And like one of them is that if you can't maintain your train of thought, then get off the train. I mean, you need to remember that people are out there. Also, eye contact. You need to look at your audience. You need, like Tom Paxton has said to me, well, it doesn't have to be eye contact, but it has to be face contact. I remember sitting in the 100th row of a basketball arena watching Bruce Springsteen, and he looked up, and I knew he was making eye contact with me. I mean, obviously he was not, but he made me feel like he was singing for me. And I think that's very important, that artists get on stage and acknowledge the audience. I think the best person for this, who gives a live workshop as a performer, is Vance Gilbert, who really has nailed it and who understands what performance is about. And you need to make the person in the audience feel they're a part of your performance and you're a part of their lives. And you need to look at them and acknowledge them. And even on the radio, where you can't see people, you still have to envision people. I don't think of a mass of blurry faces. I just think I'm talking to one person, and I want that person to feel the music. And what I say is not as important. What I say is only important as a vehicle for the music. So that's in brief. I could go on the other 18 points, but.
And I don't know if this is a subtle difference, but I mean, we're both radio DJs and have been for decades. And the question I get asked more than anything else is, what do I have to do to get my music on the radio? What am I not doing right? What should I be doing? How do you answer that question for folks who've been asking it?
Well, the envelope with the $100 bills is always nice.
Now. No trade secrets here, Rich. We don't.
All it takes is talent and quality.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I'm depressed when I get a CD from somebody who's pretty good, but the CD is terribly recorded. Folks, tune your guitar before you make your CD. I mean, if you're making a recording, tune the guitar, tune the piano. That's little things, but generally, I just listen for something that moves me spiritually or moves me intellectually, that says something important that I think people need or want to hear. And I know a good recording when I play it, and I immediately said, I can't wait to share it with them. I can't wait to get this on the radio, which is what I miss about being semi-retired. I'm still doing folk stage, but I've left the midnight special. One of the things I miss is when I hear a great song, I said, oh, I got to play that. and then I just sort of play for my partner, and that's about it. But it doesn't take a lot. And it's not a matter of production. Something can be fully produced or just voice and guitar or voice and piano, as long as it's well done and as long as you can hear the voice. And please, as long as you can hear the lyrics. So many people have great lyrics and bury them in this wave of production, this sea of noise. I have no objection to production, but make sure that what you're saying is clear to the listener, because that's where your strength is. And so what does it take? Nothing special. It also, the reason I come to farm and NERFA and SWERFA is so I can meet these people who make the music. And all it takes is being a nice person. If I meet somebody at a conference and they're a nice person, I'm more likely to listen to their music just because they've impressed me as being a good, solid person who is passionate about making music. And that's what I love to meet people and know them better for their music. So
Maybe the last kind of topic we'll discuss is something that's always impressed me about what you've been able to achieve in the Chicagoland area. There's an amazing folk music community, and I know there's been a history of an amazing folk music community in Chicago, but there is also a community that has surrounded the Midnight Special, which is an outtake from that community, right? It's just, can you talk a little bit about volunteers? Talk a little bit about how the community has propped up what has become one of the most important communities of folk music in our country, of Chicago.
well, I've always focused on promoting local venues and local performances. We have a variety of, from the Two-Way Street Coffee House to the Acoustic Renaissance concerts, to the Old Town School, to Lake County Folk Club, the Woodstock Folk Festival, the Fox Valley Folk Festival. I feel it's my obligation, my mission, I should say, not obligation, but mission, to support these venues, which give artists work, which give artists exposure. And ultimately, the artists have been very good to WFMT. And some of my listeners have actually volunteered before COVID to come into the station and help me as far as entering new releases into our database, catering our New Year's Eve party for us, things that I would never envision, but these listeners are just so devoted to making this program happen. And it's been a very special feeling to have this two-way street, to feel that the venues, the artists, WFMT, there are several fine folk music shows in Chicago, WNUR, WDCB. There are some great shows on the air. And we all, I think, are focused on supporting the community. To me, that is one of the most important things. And like, when COVID hit, I sent the Old Town School a check, an extra donation, because it's too important to see it fail. And I've sent artist donations because I want people to survive doing what they want to do musically. But Chicago is a good community, and it's a very special community. It's very different from Philadelphia or Boston or New York. It's more, I think, more tight knit. We don't have a Philadelphia Folk Festival. We don't have the diversity of Boston or the mammoothness of New York, but we do have a very intimate conversation within our folk community in Chicago. And it's always been an honor to be part of that. And WFMT has been doing this since 1953. And I don't think any other radio station can claim that. And
For
it's
people
an honor
who
for me.
For
Yeah, go
people
ahead.
who may not know, Rich, will you talk a little bit about the fact that the Midnight Special continues with a new host? Like, fill people in on what's going on there?
Yeah, I decided I wanted to leave the program when I was still in good form. I've watched some artists and some DJs stay too long and go downhill. And I thought Joan Baez set an excellent example. She said, I've reached the age where my voice isn't what it used to be. I'm retiring. And I'm thinking, yes, I think that I don't want to occupy the seat longer than it's welcome, when I'm welcome in that seat. But I wouldn't retire till I could find somebody who I thought could really carry on the show with zest and verve and intelligence and musical taste. And it turns out that Marilyn Ray Beyer, who had been doing folk music in Boston, had moved back to Chicago. And we got together and had a few meals, went to a few Folk Alliance conferences. And I said, you're the person. you're the person who can continue this program with the spirit and the whole idea of what it's all about. So it made me feel free to retire. Unfortunately for myself, I chose a year where I can't do anything I plan to do in retirement, like many of us who are here today. But I think I did the right thing, and I'm still doing folk stage. I could not give up folk stage because the 80 or so people who are members, we became family. We bonded.
You know, Rich, before you talk about that, tell folks who may not know what folk stage is briefly what folk stage is.
Well, it's a live concert series. It started in 1998, and it's a 1 hour live concert on the air plus a half-hour warm-up set for the studio audience, and 2 or 3 live concerts a month. And then we have this vast archive of all these recordings we've made over the past 60, 70 years. So the weeks we don't have a live concert, we slot in an archive concert. It could be Odetta, it could be Richard Dyer Bennett, it could be Tom Paxton, whatever. But Folk Stage is the only totally self-supporting program on WFMT where the listeners donate enough money that we don't have to sell advertising or underwriting credits for the program. And we get together before the concerts and we have a party. People bring the most amazing food to our kitchen. We have a donor who donates coffee, fresh roasted coffee from an exclusive coffee house. And we became family. And also, I love relating to the artists on this very intimate level in our studio and getting to meet artists and support artists. And so that's why I couldn't quite leave folk stage, and why it's, we're still doing live folk stage concerts. We just do them to an empty church now. They closed our studio. So we rented the church in Hinsdale that's used by the Acoustic Renaissance Concert Series. And we have an artist on stage, and we pay extra now because we call it the COVID bonus. And he or she or they perform a live concert, which Randy Steika has arranged to video stream to our members only. And it's really weird to have these people in this church. I can't imagine you doing it, Matt, because you want people to sing along. And it's really hard to get all those invisible people to sing along.
Yeah.
But we do it in this church, and we do it live just because I think there's something special about live music. And someday this pandemic will end and we'll be back to live concerts wherever we're going to do it, in the studio, in the church, and we are going to continue the video streaming for our members. It's opened a whole new dimension for people who can't make it to the concert. So it's something I didn't want to give up, and I hope to stay with for at least another year. And it's just very special to be able to support live music in this way. And We've had a lot of great artists come in and do it since June live.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, you're not a performer in the sense of Claudia, Reggie, and Ann, but I do want to give the option of either singing a song or doing an interpretive dance. I don't know which you've chosen. Or maybe because you are also a terrific interviewer yourself, is there any question I didn't ask you that you think you needed to be asked?
Well, first, the other people appearing today did take up a collection for me not to sing. So that's taken care of. And also, going back to Claudia, the very last song I played on my very last Midnight Special was from Claudia Schmidt's second album. So some of these things, we're so intertwined, as Michael Smith wrote, here in Spoon River. And so our lives are entwined in Spoon River, and it's the same in radio, and it's the same in folk music. And it's just, I don't know what my life would be like without. I'm looking at the screen of a lot of different people. Most of you I know, most of you I've talked with at various conferences, and you have, here's a song for all the good people who've touched up my life. And without you, I don't know what life would be. So thanks.
I think I speak for all of them when I say that it's true about you as well, Rich. Thank you so much for all you've done for this community.
Well,
Not a big hand for Rich Warren, everybody. Oh gosh, I guess now I got to turn to Ann Hills. I'm going to ask you can unmute yourself, Ann.
No, then you'll have to hear my big laugh. Yeah.
I like I mentioned, I do absolutely love all of the people I get to interview today. I've probably spent more time with Ann than any of them just because we've known each other a very long time. We've She stays at our house when she's touring very often. Our kids grew up together,
Nice
and
pajama parties we had,
that's
that was
right.
great.
It's true, and I'm just thrilled that you're part of this, Anne, especially because and Rich brought up for me another thread that puts you guys all together, which is even though all three of you, Reggie, Claudia, and Anne, are amazing songwriters, not none of none, all three of you don't just play your own songs. You really
Yeah, and do
you really
interpretive.
go out and cultivate the very best that's out there and blend them in with your own songs, and that's true of all three of you, not true of all performers. Is
Right.
there a reason why you think you chose to do it that way? Because you could easily do a million nights of your own
Well,
songs.
when I started performing, I was performing other people's songs, and every once in a while I'll do one of the first songs that I wrote. Actually, when I was 6, I wrote, fill her up with regular, fill her up with regular, fill her up with regular. Whoa, let's go. So,
The big
I was,
money song. Yeah.
so I was always writing, but then a guy named Carl Burdick in our local community over in Michigan started giving me tapes, mixed tapes of other performers that he was hearing on the Midnight Special. My parents had always listened to WFMT, but more for the classical music. So, though my dad brought home Simon and Garfunkel, I'll never forget when he brought home their record. But so I listened to other people, and luckily, and then I was introduced to people who played me their songs, and I like their songs. I like traditional songs. I was sort of led. I always think of this as, we're kind of in this river that takes us all these different places, and there's an eddy over here, and we learn something in this, and then we fall back in the stream, and we're over in here. It's sort of the way that Claudia, sort of described her performing, the way she pulls things together and it pulls the audience in with her. I think of it as I've always thought of it as collaborative work. I never have heard a song from tradition or written by other people that wasn't influenced by somebody else. I think you start writing because maybe there's something that you want to say a little differently,
Right.
or you haven't found the song yet quite that says what you want it to say, and there's the motivation, because if there's so many really great songs, how do you decide to make a new song at all? I could sing all night other people's songs, and every one of them would be good. So it's but you also, we become immersed in our community. And I moved into Chicago with Jan Berta. We started a store. Jan taught me how to play banjo. He taught me more about playing guitar. He taught me about traditional American music. And I remember getting Claudia's, that beautiful Midwestern heart with that beautiful sketch of her on the front, and then hearing Sally Rogers, and then we started bringing people to the store to perform. While we were doing the more traditional music, we are very lucky. Chicago is a unique community that when I was there, welcomed everybody. I mean, we'd have people on the stage that were more rock and roller performers, like Mike Jordan, who would introduce that influence into the writing. So, yeah.
So talk a little bit more about your early introduction to all this. I know you also went to college here in Michigan at an arts college in northern Michigan.
Yeah, well, that's probably when I hit my first trio was up at Interlochen Arts Academy, and we did do some touring. We toured a couple. I think there was this. I found a program for a show we did at a synagogue, and we were doing sort of Peter, Paul, and Mary, and what else did we? Just a lot of music that was being played at that time. And at the same time, I was the singer with the jazz band. The female vocalist, there was a male vocalist, and taking classical music with them wanting me to go into opera. And really, I kept coming back to this music.
I was going to say, how many people did you disappoint by going into folk music?
Well, I mean, how many? Yes, there's Laura Nero, and there are jazz or more soul artists that have political, in political ideas in their songs. There are a lot of people who would bring that are in other, but this field seems the most potent for for opening people's hearts, opening up their minds, giving them a different point of view. Opera can do that in its own way, in the many different languages that opera's in, but because it's storytelling. But storytelling in our music field is extremely potent. And the toughest thing about this time is that it's also very collaborative music. We're used to we're collaborating with the audience. It's just like Claudia says, you could do the same songs, but it shifts around depending on the audience, what they're bringing to the evening. The audience is such a huge part of what we do, and so that collaborative effort is gone with COVID, and that's been a hard thing.
Anne, one of the things I think about when I think about your early performances, and it could have been maybe the first time I ever saw you perform on stage long before we knew each other, was at the Arc in Ann Arbor. And here was this young, beautiful woman stuck between these two trolls, Tom Paxton and Bob Gibson.
I won't tell them that you called them that. Well, no, I can't tell Bob.
You can't tell Bob, right? Yeah. But it was like, here you are, a relatively new performer with two, the definition of veterans.
Veterans of it. And
what did that do for you?
Not so much Bob, though Bob influenced me very much once I met him, and we were, and he would get me writing songs. But Tom had been one of the inspirations of my coming into this music field.
How old were you when that happened? Do you remember?
I was in my mid-20s.
Yeah.
24, 25.
So what did you learn about performing or songwriting from that tour? I would imagine you had lots of time in the car to talk with these guys and get to know them a little bit. Did you learn anything about, did that propel your folk music career at all?
Well, yeah. I mean, both of their advice was learn the best of the traditional. If you hear a song that moves you by somebody else, learn that song. Because even if you only perform it once, there's so much that happens when you go through the process of learning somebody else's words and music, and then it moves through your consciousness, your experience, and then it moves even further through the audience's experience, and it becomes like something entirely different. And all you have to do is to listen to Claudia's version of Vampire, or any number of songs that she's done interpretive, or what Reggie's done interpretively. I mean, you hear, the song reaches different people, or is more potent in a different way. And so if you learn it and you perform it and then you go to write, boy, you're bringing a lot of intelligence that was a gift to you through that songwriting.
Boy, I absolutely love that advice for songwriters, because so often we find ourselves in a rut of just listening to each other's songs and not listening to those traditional songs that can feed us so much. And I know that's it really does, especially right now, while we're all stuck inside and some of us aren't feeling our most creative. Yeah. Learn someone else's song that you really admire. Get into it. Dig deep into those songs well enough to learn them, and you just might get inspired. Don't you think that's true?
Yeah. And maybe you'll only get to play them for your 12-year-old daughter or your your grandmother who's over. But that all, I remember one time when I went to play for my grandmother who was over in Battle Creek, Michigan, and I was coming from Chicago, and I had learned Run the Film Backwards, which was I'd learned from Ian McIntosh, is it? Yeah. I think, who I'd seen perform, and I loved the song. And it's a man living his life backwards, from the age of 80 back to in the womb, what will I be? And I was going to, she and her best friend was in her like late 80s, and my grandma was in her early 80s, and I thought, I can't do a song about death. Oh my God, it would be so gauche or something, but it ended up, they just loved it. They laughed. They thought it was great, So no matter who we're performing for, we're lucky to be able to perform for the people we love. And that's what happens with audiences. You end up going into a place you haven't been before, and this is what we miss the most. You go into a place that you haven't been in a few years, and you see these people, and there's this immediate connection from the last time that you got to see them. You have this warmth, and we are not a no hug community. That's for sure. People who don't like hugs are broken down at festivals, and it'll be interesting to see how we do that as we come out of this this really tough experience.
Now, some people may not know this, but later in your musical career, you've also went and got your degree and became a social worker. And I know that, I'm trying to think of the best way to say this, but Anne's performances, if you've never seen Anne on stage, are so intimate that you often feel like it was the very best thing a therapy session could be. In
Oh,
that,
thank you.
not that you've, all of a sudden you're wrecked, but just the opposite. All of a sudden you have truths unveiled about yourself, and there's a connection to that audience that Anne does that better than almost anybody I've ever seen. And I think there's a connection between your work and your knowledge as a social worker and what you do as a performer on stage when you take care of your audience. Is that accurate, do you think?
Yeah, I would say, because again, a really good in order to be a really good therapist, I have to be willing to be collaborative. In other words, if I make a suggestion, or I'm trying a certain cognitive behavioral tool, or EMDR, eye movement reprocessing for trauma, and they say, this isn't working for me, and they have to feel comfortable enough with me that they can say, this is working, and I can go, okay, let's try something else. Some of it, that was the toughest thing, I think, as a young performer, is when I could see that the songs I was choosing, or the introductions I was giving, was making, I could feel the room shifting, from that connection, which is where we get our energy to sing better than we can on a live recording. I mean, than in a recording studio, because we're getting the energy from the audience in so many ways. But you can feel it shift. And when you're new to performing and you feel that, it's terrifying. You don't know how to shift. You're not sure what to do. And you want to close up. You want to just close up. And what you have to do is open up bigger, right? You have to open your heart and look in. You want to look away from the eyes, like you said, but no, you got to look people in the eye, and you got to realize that what they want is connection with you. That's why they've come to the show, is for connection, right? Is for us to feel that we belong to each other. We belong to this world, right?
Would you say that's something you grew into, or would you say that's something you had a sense of all along?
Well, I come from a long line of ministers and doctors, and teachers. And I've that's one of the things that I've come to see as real privilege, is people who believe in social justice. I came from a family who believed in social justice and economic justice, and we're working through the church, through the Methodist Church, to change things, to work to the racism that existed within our small community in Michigan. And so and would get up and talk about it. And I have a brother there who still gets up and talks about it and gives people, book lists of things to read about systemic racism or whatever, And so that part, the only scary part, is what everybody feels when they come up on stage in front of a new group of people. Are they gonna like me? Am I good enough? And as a therapist, let me tell you, walking into a session for the first time with a person, I'm thinking the same thing. Am I gonna be good enough? And if I shut down and I'm not listening, because I'm listening only to that voice that's saying, you're not good enough, this person has had way too much trauma, you can't help them, then I'm sure to fail. So I have to say, okay, I'm just going to be the best that I can be, and we're going to work. And that's what I mean about that collaborative thing. Even this thing is really hard. I want to look at Claudia because I see her laughing up there, and I see you've done such a great job pulling this together. And I see Reggie and Sue, and Michael comes from Florida. Michael Stock comes, what I mean? I see everybody up there, and I want everybody together, So yeah, so collaboration is a huge part. And
there certainly is there's a certain amount of willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's in all of that, because you could also turn the lights way up and you could just close your eyes and you could sing your songs and you could get applause, and that would be okay. But what you do isn't just that.
Right.
Because you put yourself out there in a way that is vulnerable. And if I can just make a quick observation about something that's been true of all of you so far, is this idea. I hope I didn't just lose my train of thought. I did. So we'll move on to something else. Talk and I'm sure I'll come back to it
It'll
because
come
that's the
back
way
to
my
it. Yeah,
brain
it'll
works.
come back.
So talk a little bit more about this idea of social work itself. You've often said that like folk music is sort of the social work, or how I forget you. What remember the
Yeah,
quote?
when Mark and I had our daughter, people would say, "Well, what church are you going to take her to?" And Mark being, raised Jewish, and me being, raised, in the Methodist church, what are you? And I said, "We're going to take her to folk festivals." How is she going to learn how to be ethical and moral? We're going to take her to folk festivals. It's in every song, or not. If not every song, it is just a constant thread. And that thing of feeling vulnerable, that's why we're a hugging community. People can walk onto a folk festival ground with a disability. They're not particularly attractive. They are from another country. There will be warmth there for everybody. And that's why I say, when I started to go back to school to get the social work degree, people said, "Why? You're already a social worker." But I wanted to have, I don't know. Well, now I'm just glad that I have a job. I get to work in a social work agency, and I really get to try to help find resources as well as help people. And I can see how important this election coming up is, how
Right.
important it is for everybody to vote and to get in a compassionate.
I think the other thread that I was going to talk about was Claudia as a performer and as an innkeeper, and as a partner, a life partner to someone. You as a life partner to we all play these different roles. We're not just obviously folk singers, and I think that's what when I give advice to people about performing. I had this one woman in one of my performance workshops who said, I just get so nervous on stage. I'm in my head.
Yeah.
I have all those thoughts. And I said, "Well, what do you do for a living?" She goes, "Well, I'm a nurse." And I said, "Well, how are you as a nurse?" And she said, "Oh, I have great bedside manner. People, I'm right there with them." And I said, "Well, you're not a different person when you're on stage. You're the nurse. Why would that have to change?"
Yeah.
And I think that's true of all of you, including Rich. It's like, what we are is who we are on stage is who we are off stage. And if you want to get better, be a better person on stage, well, I'll let you fill in the blank, right? You got to learn to be present. If you want to have stage presence, you should probably learn to have presence in your life as well. And I think
and not be so hard on yourself.
exactly.
Be hard enough to edit and take some ideas and criticisms from other people, but not beat yourself up, because in truth, the audience doesn't want you beating you. They don't want to watch you beat yourself up. They want to watch you enjoying yourself, right?
Well, before we get to your song, Anne, let me just ask you a couple of other things. One of the things I've always admired about your CD and recorded music output is how you will put out a beautiful CD of original music, and then you'll find Opal Whiteley, and you'll collaborate with Michael Smith and do this amazing thing with Opal, and then you'll find the poems of the Indiana poet.
Riley, yeah.
Oh yeah, of James Whitcomb Riley, and then you'll go, "I love train songs. I'm going to do an entire record of train songs." And
projects help.
I love those. They're great. They're really wonderful. And I'd like you to talk about that approach to recording, and if you would too, talk about the new one that you're working on right now with our mutual friend.
Okay. Well, let me just tell you one of the things that this sort of connects to both of these. That I read a New Yorker article that was talking about the experience that it is for psychologist, and with the not being able to go into the office, trying to talk and counsel somebody on the screen, not being able to be in person with somebody. And he says in this article, we try to compare it to something, but we find once again it's kind of like an accidental August. August is the month that people that therapists take off. But now it's like an accidental August with no Labor Day in sight. We don't know when we'll be back with people. And so that phrase, accidental August, kept going around in my head. And I wrote the lyrics for a song. And then my friend Al Power and I had been working. Al Power is a wonderful writer from Rochester, New York, who's also a dementia specialist and flies all over the world to lecture. And so he and I were writing a proposal for Bellagio to write songs of empathy, to bring to open up the hearts of people who work with people with dementia and family members who have dementia. And just as we're writing the proposal, it hits Italy. COVID hits Italy. Well, needless to say, they aren't accepting applications. But we had already started working songs about love and compassion. And we said, let's just, and all of his lectures around the world had been canceled, and all our shows, my shows were canceled. So we started writing. And also during this time, I lost my other greatest collaborator for so many years, Michael Smith, and went to Chicago and did hospice with Michael. And so all of these things and these feelings, these really intense feelings, I wrote all of the lyrics, and he's written the music, and he just loved being able to go through a lot of what he had learned when he was getting his nearly a master's in music. So so that's coming out. It's
when will
not
that
done
be
yet.
out, do you
It's
think?
mostly piano based, and I can't play it.
Oh, that's okay. You can play whatever you want, because whenever you sing, I feel better.
Well, thank you. This is I'll do Everything Matters. And this song came about because this somebody I'd been working with for a while in therapy sort of said to me at the end of the session, well, why should I bother forgiving, he's already gone, or why should I do anything? And nothing really matters once the person who hurt you is gone. You can't. And so I've been thinking about that, and Mark had been out canvassing for Clinton, and encountering a lot of anger. So those things all kind of came together in the song. And then Eileen Weiss, speaking of collaboration, my friend Eileen Weiss, who's Dr. Noodle when she goes to do the clown care at the hospital, was coming in to visit me. And I said, I've got the lyrics, and here are the lyrics, write a melody. She came in with a ukulele. And
so this is a collaboration with Dr. Noodle?
Dr. Noodle, yes.
Great.
It is. Guaranteed to be healthy for you. You ask me, does it matter? There's so little you can do. You ask me, can it be enough? So I'll say this to you. Every choice we make, every voice we hear, every time we face our fears, everything matters, and everything we do will soon come shining through. You say you're sorry for the past, and that nothing can change that. You sit here and cradle your regrets, stroke it like a cat. Well, I can relate to that. But every truth we speak, every chain we break, every chance can we reach to take, everything matters, and everything we do soon comes shining through. I know we all are shaken by the past and future too. And here, inside this moment, we may feel deeply blue, but still so much to do. But everything we try, every bridge we build, every drop of blood unspilled, yeah, everything matters, and everything we do will soon come shine. Like getting together on Zoom, as frustrating as it can be, seeing these faces, it's great. Everything we do, everything matters.
That's Ann Hills, and she matters in this world. Thank you so much, Ann, for all you are. Deeply, deeply beautiful human being that
Thank
you are. Reggie Harris.
Hi, Matt.
I'm afraid we're out of time, Reggie, but thanks for playing. See,
Well, it was still worth it to me.
here's the here's the secret of me, and I live my life to make Reggie Harris laugh. That's why I live my life, because no one has a greater laugh than Reggie Harris. That's for sure. Um, it's really true. I say that we don't have time. The truth is we have all the time we need. But I did get a note from Annie saying that there's some major storms going through Chelsea, where she lives, Chelsea, Michigan. So if the thing just goes out all of a sudden, that is why. It's not because Reggie Harris broke the internet again. It's because there are storms going through Chelsea. How's it looking, Annie?
Actually, I'm going to say I had Charlie Mossberg join on as co-host through the folk thing, so it won't shut down.
Okay, good.
We are safe. Hopefully, it's a little shaky, but we're good.
But if in fact it happens, I'm going to say in my promo that I broke the internet.
I would too. Well, Reggie Harris, thank you so much for doing this with us. My respect runs so deep for Reggie Harris. I don't even know that I have words for it. He's just, my life has been so much better because of my collaborations with him, as well as just my friendship with him. Like Claudia, like Ann, like Rich, my life is better because Reggie has been a part of it. I've also just admired and sort of looked up to how Reggie has created this amazing career that goes so far beyond just the coffee house. He is, of course, a great stage performer, but that just scratches the surface as to what Reggie Harris does and is capable of. Many of you remember Reggie as a part of a very important duo that he did with his wife, Kim Harris, for many, many years. One of the things I hope Reggie talks a little bit about, if he doesn't matter, was transitioning out of that relationship and keeping not just a solo career, but just hitting the ground running like nothing ever changed, in fact, got better in so many ways. So there's so much we can talk about, Reggie. I thought maybe you could begin by maybe just telling us a little bit about your approach to taking your art and putting it into the world in all the different ways that you do.
Well, Matt, this has been such a rich experience this afternoon, just listening to some of my favorite treasured people in the world talk about what they do and what they have done and why. And certainly the journey has been long. I said to somebody the other day that I have fully embraced elder status because for several reasons. One, because I've had an opportunity and a need to do that, because as we watch, people like C.T. Lewis and John Lewis and C.T. Vivian and the various people who have left us. I remember several years ago when Pete Seeger died, I think Joe Jinks called me up and he said, our elders are passing off the scene. What are we going to do? And I said, well, Joe, I hope you're taking notes because we're up. So some of that, but also when you have young people of a variety of ages referring to you as sir, you get the message that you've passed into a new status. But also, I had a dental appointment yesterday, and my dentist is named Dennis, and Dennis and I have kind of a relationship like you and I. We riff on each other constantly, and so he comes in to check the results of the procedure, and we just go for a while. And one of the things we talked about yesterday was that since we hit 50, our perspective deepened and changed to a point where we really, as we did not earlier in our lives, feel like we are comfortable in our skin. And I think we were both saying that doesn't happen by accident. You have to be paying attention. You have to be observant watch those folks who are living lives that you want to reach for, but also that you reach a certain level of, I don't know quite what word to use, freedom, that you no longer feel that you have to be liked by everyone. You no longer feel like you have to please everyone. And you also have a sense that you have seen a lot. Maybe not everything, but you've seen a lot. And so all of that combined shapes your life in a different way. I started off, being encouraged to play the guitar by a girlfriend I was going out with who was a folk music fan. And her name was Sharon, and Sharon started taking me to folk music concerts. And then at one point she turned to me and she said, you're so much more musical than I. You should learn to play the guitar. And I said, well, I'm kind of doing a lot of things. I'm playing ball. I'm, part of this group and that group. I don't really think, because I always thought you were a really interesting, curious person. But if you're not even willing to learn a couple of chords, I don't think I want to go out with you anymore. And I wasn't finished going out with her. So I said, okay, fine, teach me a couple of chords. And she taught me a D and an A, and I learned a G on my own. And the rest is history. I was able to thank her years later when I visited her school to perform for giving me not only a career, but a passion. And I grew up in a musical community. As you know, I grew up in a church that song was everywhere, and then in schools, song was everywhere. And my life was just song constantly. It surrounded me. So finding the guitar and then finding folk music really gave me an outlet that I hadn't had to express myself. And then I met Kim when we were both working at a camp in 1974. And now I had a partner to explore this unknown world. I had no idea what folk performers did or what musicians did when they traveled around, or that people could actually write songs. Although I heard Annie share that first song of hers. I think my first song was called I Know I Have a Friend in You. Long title, okay song, But that gave me permission to begin to probe inside of myself. And, a big part of it was that I was growing up as an African American eclectic kid, as my history teacher in 8th grade said. He said to my mother, Reginald's a very eclectic boy. And my mother thought he meant I talk too much, which in case, I mean, I do, but but the fact of the matter is, he told her that he could get me into a school that was outside of the area where I lived, further away from home. And she asked him a question. She said, is that a better school? The code between the two of them was, do white kids go there? And he said, he was a African-American man. He said, yes, Mrs. Harris, it's a better school. So she said, then he needs to go there. So going to Almy High School instead of Gratz High School is the reason I'm sitting here. Because life transformations often happen on little moments when people you meet become angels to open a window or a door for your next transition. And I have a life filled with those transitions, and some of them are on this grid today. I took a quick cruise through, and I can see so many faces here who provided another opportunity, and certainly Rich Warren being one of them. Who has just been not only a friend, but a mentor and an angel who, in moments when really needed something to add to what I or Kim and I were trying to do, was there to provide it. I have to say that Claudia Schmidt gave me a very early entry to a new phase, because Kim and I had hit the college circuit and we were traveling around America, 70,000 miles a year in our car. And all of this was new to both of us. And I give a big shout out to Kim, because she matched my curiosity and my, I'll say now, fearlessness, but some of it was cluelessness. Somebody said, there's a lot of that in folk music.
Just a little.
Somebody said you need to drive to Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and go to this festival, and we said okay, and got in the car and went there. But I went to a conference, coffee house conference, run by the NACA, National Association of Campus Activities, and we got a job at Menominee, Wisconsin. Who knew where Menominee was? Yeah. And so we go, and we are playing on this little festival at a community college. And on that Saturday afternoon, there were, I think, 5 or 6 performers, and the headliner was Claudia Schmidt. And we were doing our songs, and we had our stage patter, and we thought we were ready for fame and fortune and stardom. But we knew we were still learning, and we got to this place, and it was in a caffeinatorium, totally devoid of any theatrical, environmental beauty. And the first act went on, the second act went on. I think we were third or whatever. And then Claudia took the stage, and she did exactly what you were talking about today. She transformed that space into a focused place of performance. And I watched her that day, and I said, I want me some of that. I want to know how to do that. So I had a lot of those experiences over the course of years, and thinking about how we could put those things together. Along the way, we discovered that there was an opportunity to delve into our history, largely because we were also finding that through our early years of traveling around America, that being an African American meant that we were going to have, particularly in folk music or in music period, we were going to have a different journey. And we were struggling with that journey, struggling with some of the rejection, struggling with some of the uncertainty, struggling with our own lack of knowledge of our own background and history of who we were. And so in that moment, I watched Claudia, and I started taking notes, and I continued taking notes. And then we found this vehicle through an opportunity that the Philadelphia Folk Song Society provided going into schools. And we came up with a program on the Underground Railroad, and then a whole new world was opened. So over the course of years, it's been festivals and coffee houses, churches, schools, this career that I didn't know was possible suddenly had me standing on a stage in Austria and leading 1,000 uh, Austrians in rainbow race. And having a friendship for 28, 29 years with Pete Seeger and Tom Paxton and all these people, having a friendship with Ann Hills, who I have just completely loved as a person, but also as an artist with such incredible integrity of voice. And as you were talking before, of choosing the right song, and also not being hemmed in by just being a musician who produced songs, finding themes to delve into the artistic vision. So it's been, we started early on playing in a comedy club as the musical relief. And I learned so much in that comedy club from all the comedians, Jay Leno and Michael Keaton, and some of the people who came through there. So all along the way, it's just been this amazing opportunity to learn. And the breakthrough that I personally had in talking about performance, because for years my performance was really geared and focused on pleasing the audience. And not that it shouldn't be. You want people to go home happy, but I was always struggling because the audiences can be up and down. They can be, 5,000 people. They can be five. You can be tired on a night, and you need that audience to really come through and give you energy, and they just kind of sit there. And I was struggling with all of that, and teaching a performance course at Toronto Noah, where you also teach. And as it happened, we had a performance one Saturday afternoon. It was in a theater with high school kids, and we had to get to the airport quickly afterwards. And so somebody said, "Well, I know you really need to get to the airport quickly. We have a parent here who is the pilot, and he knows all the back roads to get to the airport. So he said, he'll take you to the airport. He will absolutely get you there on time." So we finished the performance, and we got in his car, and he says, "No problem, we got plenty of time." So as we drove, I started asking him all these airline questions. What happens when I see the flaps go up? What happens when, rotors, reversing the engines, all this stuff about aerial flight. And then I said to him, "Do you ever feel the pressure of having those 200 or 300 people behind you that you need to fly this plane and land it so that they're safe?" And he said, "No, not really." And I said, "Really? Come on, come on." And he said, "No, I really don't." And I said, "So you don't feel that pressure?" He said, "No." He said, I fly the plane to the best of my ability because I love to fly and because I want to live. They can come along for the ride. And I had a light bulb moment. It told me why I plunged it. It told me why I take the stage, but it also told me that exactly as you say, you need to be who you are. You need to understand who you are. And then you need to frame your career around that in ways that open you to new experiences that you and the audience can take. And that from that moment on, uh, the other thing that opened me up was having a liver transplant, and we don't have time to go into that.
But that was a huge transition for you in lots of ways, I know. But just riffing off one of the phrases you used, which is one that comes up a lot at conferences, fame and fortune. Does any of this have anything to do with fame and fortune?
Well, it's really funny. I'm certainly more famous than I ever thought I would be, um, and I get recognized places. And but no, it's certainly not for me. A comedian that I know and love had a line that I stole years ago, and I use it sometimes. He said, I didn't get into this business to be rich and famous, and so far that's working out real well."
He's reached his goal. That's good. Because, one of the things, and I know that that often is a goal, whether we admit it or not, when we're first starting out in the music business. A lot of us start out later in our lives when we're starting to get a little more comfortable in our skin. But one of the things I've always admired about you, Reggie, is just how many different ways you've figured out to make money, make your living doing this, doing this in a variety of different ways. Of course, we can see you in a concert hall, but we're just as likely to see you in a Sunday morning service or on a bus in Alabama leading a bunch of people on a pilgrimage in songs from the civil rights movement, or at an Underground Railroad school assembly. And it seems to me that artists who are trying to make their way in folk music, which is different than pop music, because it includes all of the things that I just mentioned. It seems to me that, develop a school program. Look at how your unique talents can expand and enhance the community that you live in. Would you say that's kind of what you've done?
Oh, that's exactly what I've done. Early on, it became pretty apparent that having a career that was only one thing. I see these people who are, singer-songwriters and reach a level of fame and travel around. That's all they do. Not that that's, not a great thing to be able to do, but it wasn't going to be the path that was available to us, and other opportunities opened. So yeah, it was, before I moved out of Philadelphia, we were not only doing school programs, but we were doing, concerts at nursing homes, and we were doing hospitals. I became aware of the fact that this music and the opportunity to have a creative connection to people could happen anywhere. And so when people said, "Could you come sing here?" You go, "Yeah." And that just led to all kinds of other opportunities. And then the school career, really, I would say over the course of years, that was the primary thing that I was doing. We were in, over 200 schools a year at one point. And that's a lot of traveling and a lot of kids. But I really treasured those because you can't bargain with kids as an audience. Either you're going to be interesting or you're not, and they're more than willing to entertain themselves. So you got to be in the moment. And I mean, you can roll things out and sort of do the same program, but I kind of suffer from short attention span, so I never do pretty much the same show twice. I always want to add something different. I always want to, and kids give you a wonderful opportunity to do that because they may come out with something, or they're just going to react to something in a different way. Kids in New York are going to react differently than kids in Louisiana, than kids in Wisconsin, and you got to be on that. When I went to, Georgia and Alabama, perhaps, I got to slow my speech down and take more time with them because it's a different rhythm of life. They're enculturated in a different way. You need to pay attention to those things. Well, the same is true of adults in many ways, but kids are more immediate. They're kind of like, "Oh, you're not paying attention to us? Well, fine, we're done with you."
Yeah,
So,
they'll tell you.
yeah, so you got to really be there. But
Well, one of the few things that makes you different than, let's say, Frank Sinatra is Frank Sinatra doesn't perform with a basketball hoop over his head probably as often as you have. But one of the things that surprises adults, singer-songwriters and stuff, is that you'd be shocked at how fulfilling those gigs can be once you allow yourself to do them. I know folks who are so talented and yet kind of afraid of that audience. And I often want to just say, try it and you'll see that you'll enjoy it as much as any concert you'll do anywhere else if
Well,
you
both
take it for what it is.
you and I have both talked to other artists about this for years, and I would say probably 10% of them have taken me up on it.
Yeah.
And there isn't, after my liver transplant and coming back to the music, I promised myself, just as a connection point, that during any performance at a school, regardless of the size of the audience, I would, by the end of the performance, look into the face of every kid in that room. It was a reconnection for me, because I understood coming back the power of the emotional connection that music makes in a different way. But it was also a reconnection to keep myself present, because I remember things. I remember my second grade teacher walking in and saying, "Today we're going to sing a song by a man named Woody Guthrie," and then leading us in "This Land Is Your Land," and shaping my world in a different way. Suddenly I knew about redwood trees, and I knew that there was a place called Kansas, and I knew, I mean, that little moment in second grade added such volume to my life. And so I know that and I tell older students, high school students all the time, you never know on what day someone is going to say something to you or show you something that years later is going to connect some huge transition in your life. So it's best to pay attention every day, as hard as that is to do. And I think performers, we often forget that most of the good that comes from our work will not happen in the room while we're there. So particularly with schools, I know that I have to represent and I have to be present in that moment so that whatever might happen can happen. And, sometimes that means throwing a student out of the auditorium, and just kind of going, "Hey, excuse me, young man in the pink shirt, I need you to get up. Could you help him get out?" Because that moment is sacred. We need to focus everybody's attention on that moment because something's happening here. And I often laugh when, performers tell me that they're afraid of kids,
Yeah.
I know you've heard it too.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, and I'd love for you to take us out with a song because we are running out of time. But the other thing I just realized as you said the word sacred is the other thing that all four of these people have in common, Rich Warren, Claudia Schmidt, Ann Hills, and Reggie Harris, is that they have the gift of making whatever space they're in a sacred space. And that's when the magic happens, whether it be on a radio program, whether it be in a coffee house, at a school, on a bus. It's taking wherever you are and turning it into a sacred space. And once that happens, then the reverence follows. You got to, you don't know, any more songs? Could you do a song for us?
I think I got one. And this one came out. It was the first song I wrote in this pandemic. And actually, it's the name of the new CD I'm working on. And it came because it's tied to the spirituals, because that's where I get so much of my strength and grounding. The spirituals, as Frederick Douglass called them, the sorrow songs, but they're not just sorrow songs. They're songs that encapsulate the entirety of human experience, from devastation to celebration and triumph. And so in thinking about that, this song rose out of the spirituals tradition, but it also kicks into some of the gospel and some of the pop leanings that I have. So this chorus came to me as I was sitting here in the house in April. "We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. And for this to work the best, y'all need to take a deep breath, put your feet on the floor, and get ready to sing." So I think we're ready to go. I'll sing the chorus twice, and then just kind of join in. We need some harmonies on this. We'll hear them in the ether. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. Been a long, hard journey on a winding road. So many have gone before us. They carried a heavy load, but they went there singing as they made their way. Now it's in their footsteps we follow as we work today. We will not rest till the storm is over. We will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. I know that you're weary. We all feel the pain. Sometimes the actions of the world will try your soul again, but I believe there's a better day, and it's coming our way. That's why we're raising our voices as we work today. We will not rest till the storm is over. Well, we will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. All around us there's hatred. All around us there's fear. Violence touches our lives, and the message is clear. We mourn our martyrs, in our hearts they'll stay. Then we'll sing, we shall overcome, and go on our way. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. Well, we will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. We will not rest till the storm is over. Hey, we will not lay this burden down. We will keep each other strong. We will love and carry on till we stand all together on solid ground. Till we stand all together on solid ground. Till we stand all together on solid ground.
Yeah, that's Reggie Harris, everybody. That's all you need to know about Reggie right there. That's it. Thank you so much, buddy. I appreciate it. All of you guys, Rich Warren, Claudia Schmidt, Ann Hills, Reggie Harris. What a blessing you all are to our community.
Can I add one short thing?
Yes,
We have time?
sure.
I don't have a song, but I'm publishing my third book of poetry next month.
Oh,
And
great.
this is the most recent poem that I wrote a month after leaving the Midnight Special. I thought might be appropriate. It's called Epilogue. And I'd like to share it. It's very short.
Oh, cool.
Superannuated serenade, signal severed, eclipsed laser, unplugged player, heedlessly broken, speechlessly spoken, mutes music, rescinds radio waves, shelves shelter, reticent recordings, lyric contrails, vapor voices, genie jewel boxes, veined hands valued, old loves lost, static enervates ears, cobweb cable arcs, spidery sparks, midnight's memento, settles silently, trackless train of naught, special no more.
Oh,
That's the final poem in the book. Thanks for letting me do that.
beautiful.
Thank you, Rich.
Hey,
I'll-
Reggie,
Yeah.
I just wanted to say it's a lot better to be called sir than to be called ma'am.
And that will be true for a long time.
it's very difficult being elderly.
Well, I'll throw it back to Annie Caps.
Thanks, Annie, for doing that.
Stop. I just want you guys to just let us be a fly on the wall while y'all talk for another, hour. This was I'm just going to stay personally hidden over here in the corner, and I'm going to say, you all, lovely people, thank you. Wave your hands. Go to gallery view if you want. Flip your hands up and show some love for these amazing people: Reggie Harris, Ann
Yeah.
Mills, Rich Warren, Claudia Schmidt, and our gracious host, Matt Watroba. This has been the fastest 2 hours. It's too long. And we are so grateful to all of you for your time today, for your wisdom. I can't wait to watch this again. I want to put a shout out to Joe Gale, who has been our captioner. It's my fault she got started late. I forgot to set her up. And I want to just another shout out to my virtual connections team, Brianna Lane and Charlie Mossbrook, and the whole farm board for their support behind all this work we've been doing. Do not forget that we have a keynote speech tomorrow with John McCutcheon, followed by our annual, wow, that's a hard one, annual general meeting. All are welcome, and there's a bunch more information at farmvirtualconnections.org. I've put this up on the website, but right now go out and buy recordings from all of these amazing people, and buy Rich's poetry book as soon as it's available. And by all these amazing people, I mean Matt Watroba as well. And we cannot wait to see you again on our itty bitty little screens, but really more.
Nice seeing everybody. To scroll through, you can see all. I can say hi. There's so many people here. Thank you, everybody who came. Too.
I'm going to gallery view for the Facebook, so y'all in our tiny little squares now.
Annie, would you just say "get in the room" one more time so we can hear you?
In the room. No.
That was worth it.
I forgot to ask Charlie Steen. I've got to Charlie Steen put that together, our videographer. Did I say that? He's amazing. And I just at the very last said we need something.
Yeah, it was great.
That's kind of how we all approach performing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get in
like
the
it.
room!
Get in the room. Right, exactly.
Oh man, it's so nice to see everybody. I miss you all.
I know.
Let's just stare. For
Hang in there, everybody.
All right,
Yeah.
we love you. Thank you. The abrupt, awful goodbye that is Zoom is about to ensue. So
Okay. Bye, everybody.
have a great week. We'll see you tomorrow.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.